Nobody saw it coming, not even those closest to him. Donnie Swaggart, the son of legendary televangelist Jimmy Swaggart, has just delivered a farewell that has left the entire congregation in stunned silence. In a moment of raw emotion, his voice cracked, and his eyes filled with tears as he revealed something so personal, so shocking, that it has sent ripples through the Christian community. What happened behind the scenes? And why is Jimmy Swaggart one of the most well-known names in televangelism, now facing his final years utterly alone? For decades, the Swaggart name has been synonymous with fiery preaching, scandalous controversies, and powerful television broadcasts. But what Donnie shared wasn't just another scandal. It was a revelation that peeled back the curtain on a family, a faith, and a legacy so intertwined with power and pain that it will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew. In today's video, we dive deep into the events leading up to Donnie's unexpected public farewell. His words were filled with a level of vulnerability and heartbreak that no one could have predicted. What drove this moment? What secret did Donnie expose? And why did it shatter the image of the Swaggart dynasty? We'll unpack the complex, fractured relationship between Donnie and his father, the whispers of turmoil within the ministry, and the heart-wrenching truth behind why, at 89 years old, Jimmy Swaggart might now be facing his twilight years in complete isolation. This isn't just about a son's goodbye. It's about a family legacy unraveling. It's about the end of an era for one of America's most controversial preaching families. So, buckle up, because in this video, we're not just revealing a farewell. We're uncovering the truth about a dynasty in decline, a legacy in crisis, and what might just be the final chapter of the Swaggart name. You won't believe what transpired in the days leading up to the speech and who has been inexplicably absent throughout the whole event. Before delving into Donnie's heartbreaking farewell, we must acknowledge the immense burden this man has carried since infancy. Pastor Donnie Swaggart is not your typical pastor. He was born into one of America's most potent and contentious religious dynasties. Jimmy Swaggart, his father, became well known in the 1970s and 1980s, enthralling millions of people with his ferocious sermons, heartfelt altar calls, and dramatic musical performances. With weekly broadcasts to almost 2 million households worldwide, Jimmy Swaggart Ministries was earning over $150 million annually at its height. However, the Swaggarts were destroyed by the same empire that gave them prominence. The legacy of the family was permanently tarnished by the controversy of 1988, in which Jimmy Swaggart emotionally admitted to moral failure with prostitutes. His prayer, "I have sinned against you, my Lord," is now ingrained in televangelist history. It was this moment that instantly converted believers into skeptics. This is where Donnie enters the picture. Donnie, the sole child of Jimmy and Frances Swaggart, emerged as the family's ray of hope. He received early training to take over the ministry, maintain the cameras running, restore trust, and clean up the brand, preaching, singing, and fronting the Sun Life Broadcasting Network like a polished successor to the throne. He stood by his father's side for years. But beneath the well-dressed lectures and expensive clothes lay a guy with emotional scars and secrets that no one could see. Furthermore, family members claimed that Donnie was never really allowed to express his opinions. The image of the ministry needs to be maintained at all times. Just obedience, no protest, no questions. It wasn't just a farewell when he just had an emotional breakdown. The release has been planned for decades. However, a very disturbing incident that occurred just a few days prior to the farewell altered everything. Every sad farewell conceals a buildup of tension, suffering, and unresolved feelings. According to insiders, Donnie Swaggart's breaking point didn't happen suddenly. It was the outcome of years of unspoken conflict, deteriorating bonds, and an unavoidable truth. Staff at the Family Worship Center in Baton Rouge reported observing Donnie's strange behavior in the weeks preceding his dramatic remark. He apparently left the stage during a recording break, something he had never done before, and seemed more reclusive. He also occasionally skipped morning meetings. Rumors began to circulate. Was he ill? Did family drama resurface? Was this his final resignation? However, something much more intimate was later disclosed by ministry insiders. Donnie's relationship with his father, Jimmy Swaggart, had been severely strained. According to one insider, the two had simply exchanged courteous words in public to preserve the appearance of unity. not really speaking in private for months. Long-standing disputes over the ministry's future, financial management, and how much of the family's inner turmoil should be revealed to the public are said to be the cause of this emotional isolation. According to reports, Donnie, who is currently in his 60s, had been advocating for greater openness in order to address the elephant in the room, which included dwindling viewership, financial issues, and a growing distance from newer generations of believers. However, people in the know said Jimmy Swaggart, who is now close to 90, was determined to maintain everything precisely as it was. No shift, no acknowledgement of vulnerability, and most definitely no new course. That wasn't all, though. According to a number of former employees, Donnie was also coping with personal family stress, such as the silent conflict between his kids' ministry responsibilities and their personal lives. According to reports, his son Gabriel Swaggart, who is frequently regarded as Sun Life's future face, had started making executive decisions without consulting Donnie. If Donnie was still alive, was the Swaggart empire going on without him? Donnie bravely decided to speak straight from the pulpit in the middle of this emotional tornado, not as a leader or a televangelist, but as a man who had finally had enough. He didn't stick to his prepared sermon the night of his impassioned speech. He put down the notes, stopped, and stared straight into the camera. Then he added, "I've stood here for years, but today I stand as a son who has carried a weight that isn't meant for one man, a son who has seen the price of quiet." According to reports, the room fell silent. Donnie continued by expressing gratitude to the ministry team, the congregation, and even his detractors. Then came the moment that really took everyone by surprise. The individuals you attempt to keep the most safe from might sometimes wind up abandoning you the most. Was he referring to Gabriel, Jimmy, or someone else? That wasn't merely a speech, according to a longtime churchgoer. Donnie has been waiting for that farewell for 30 years. Wait until you hear who didn't even show out to support him that evening. If you think that's the most startling thing, you would expect a united front, especially from those closest to Donnie, for an event that was so emotionally charged and appeared to herald the end of an era for the Swaggart family. However, there was a glaring quiet instead. During Donnie's moving speech, observers instantly pointed out that the patriarch himself, Jimmy Swaggart, was not present. There was no nod of appreciation, no camera pan to the front row, and no indication that he was backstage. The man who had established the empire and handed it on to Donnie decades before was conspicuously and uncannily missing. And it wasn't just that. Donnie's mother, Frances Swaggart, a prominent voice on Sunlife broadcasting, also failed to make an in-person appearance. Not a single social media post or comment recognizing her son's poignant moment. This was unimaginable to churchgoers. The Swaggarts have always taken pleasure in their togetherness and appearance. They came together, whether in celebration or crisis. Unbreakable and unflinching, they stood on that pulpit like a dynasty. However, Donnie was by himself this evening. Insiders close to the ministry say this was no coincidence. According to sources, Donnie may have faced significant internal pushback for deviating from the script and speaking from the heart without getting permission from her family. According to one source, Donnie's own son, Gabriel Swaggart, decided not to go either, reportedly because he was worried that Donnie was getting too upset and may say something that would be irrevocable. This decision was made mere hours before the funeral. A full-fledged family standoff ensued. According to the source, there were debates about whether he should even be let to speak. But as Donnie persisted, others began to back off. What's even more unexpected is that longtime friends and colleagues of the Swaggart family, including a number of important worship leaders and Sun Life panel co-hosts, were instructed to skip this one. There was only a man telling his truth, a dim pulpit, a solitary microphone, and no spotlight changes or choir behind him. And many who witnessed it believed that this truth was more about emerging from the shadows than it was about leaving the ministry. Without a word from Jimmy, Francis, or Gabriel, their absence delivered a powerful message. It was evident to spectators everywhere that something had shattered this family from the inside out, particularly to those who had followed the Swaggart ministry for decades. Even worse, nobody has made an effort to refute it. There was silence, no press announcement, no explanation of the broadcast. Furthermore, silence is more powerful than a speech in the field of televangelism, where every action is meticulously planned. However, the events that transpired the following Sunday sent even more shockwaves through the ministry and made many wonder if Donnie would ever be allowed to return to that stage. Many observers anticipated a tribute, follow-up messages, or at the very least, some kind of public recognition from the ministry following Donnie Swaggart's heartfelt and unfiltered farewell. But rather than being acknowledged or supported, it seemed to have never occurred. Replays of the Sun Life Broadcasting Network program, but not the live version, started to circulate within 48 hours. All official rebroadcasts and online sermon archives strangely omitted the tearful farewell, which had gone viral among devoted watchers. The instant Donnie put down his notes and stared straight into the camera was gone. A snippet of a previously recorded lecture took the place of the line, "A son who's watched the cost of silence." Why would the ministry take away the exact moment that had such a strong emotional connection with followers? According to discreet sources close to the production crew, Francis or Gabriel, at the top, gave the order to alter the part before it could get additional notice from the public. According to one insider, the ministry was in full damage control mode because they were concerned that Donnie's remarks may be misconstrued as an indictment against the Swaggart family, or, worse, as a complete resignation. This is when things become even more disturbing. Days later, Donnie's official Family Worship Center internet page was momentarily taken down. For over 72 hours, his biography, sermons, and attendance at events were all unavailable. When social media users observed the shift, they started to ask questions. Was Donnie being erased? Silenced? Was he being ejected? I've watched Donnie for more than 20 years. And now it's like they're trying to pretend he never said what he said. 1. A devoted fan on Facebook. That spiritual manipulation is not only disrespectful. However, neither Sun Life Broadcasting, nor Jimmy Swaggart Ministries, nor any of the family members have released an official comment. Silently, the network continued its programming as if nothing had occurred. However, those familiar with the Swaggart claim that something fundamental has changed behind the scenes. In private, it has been stated that Donnie has turned down every offer to take the pulpit again, including those for guest appearances. Since then, he has not been seen on the network. Some said that he was placed on indefinite leave, but no family member has publicly stated that information, which has fueled rumors that Donnie may have been cut off informally. Worse, ministry staff were reportedly instructed to steer the conversation to plan lectures or general prayer requests instead of bringing up Donnie's address with callers. It's more than a cover-up, it's a silencing. Additionally, in televangelism, where legacy and devotion are crucial, this type of subdued elimination frequently marks the start of something much larger. Here's what Donnie himself revealed in a private group a few days after the farewell, though, and why some people now think he's planning to leave ministry entirely. Donnie Swaggart was viewed for many years as the faithful son, the heir apparent, and the person who would bring the Swaggart name into the future. Those closest to him, however, believe that chapter may be permanently closed. Donnie was spotted having a private meal with a select few close friends and former ministry colleagues in the days after his now scrubbed farewell. According to one person who says they were there, Donnie seemed composed but emotionally spent, and the things he supposedly uttered made everyone shudder. He reportedly continued to talk about remorse, lost opportunities, and the agonizing reality of bearing someone else's weight for too long, saying, "I gave it my life, and I never got to live it for myself." That source claims that Donnie even alluded to authoring a book that would explain what it's truly like to grow up in the shadow of scandal, fame, and spiritual conflict without being mediated through Sun Life's public relations apparatus. Such a book would be revolutionary and possibly disastrous for the Swaggart empire if it were accurate. There is a growing rumor that Donnie has had private discussions with a different Christian media network that has a reputation for supporting controversial people who have caused public controversy. Some say a quiet deal is already on the table, granting Donnie his own stage on which he could express himself freely, without censorship, and free from the burden of carrying on his father's legacy. Could Donnie Swaggart's own ministry be just getting started? Donnie's personal social media accounts, which were previously inactive or run by employees, have recently displayed indications of activity, including new followers of Christian authors, advocates for emotional well-being, and even former ministers who have openly distanced themselves from the empire he helped create, which only serves to fuel the flames. From systems of Megurch, fans are beginning to notice that Donnie is obviously looking for something genuine, possibly for the first time in decades. Questions like, where's Donnie? Why are they ignoring his goodbye? Was he forced out for speaking the truth? Have been common in the comments sections of older films. One particularly impactful comment reads, Donnie finally became a man. Several Christian watchdog groups that monitor religious transparency and ministry accountability have taken notice of Donnie's abrupt disappearance, and some are already preparing investigative reports on the internal operations of Jimmy Swaggart Ministries, citing the lack of transparency and the potential silencing of a prominent public figure. They are afraid because he is just a man, not the son of a preacher or the heir to a throne. The Swaggart ministry may be in the midst of its most dire crisis since the 1988 scandal if Donnie actually leaves, or worse, if he is quietly pushed out. This time, the story is about emotional survival rather than moral failure, and Donnie Swaggart's emotional farewell was more than just a man leaving a pulpit. When he said, I've stood here for years, but today I stand as a son, it wasn't merely a symbolic statement. It was a final act of defiance against a system that prioritized image, silence, and perfection over truth. It was a cry from the soul of someone who had lived his entire life under a spotlight he never requested, carrying a name that came with both legacy and chains. This isn't just one farewell. It's about thousands of people who have watched Donnie grow from the preacher's son into a preacher with a voice of his own. The silence that followed, the deleted footage, the absence of his father, mother, and son, the silent dismissal of a man who poured his life into the Swaggart legacy, it speaks volumes. A voice that many believe the ministry has attempted to silence because truth doesn't always align with the brand. However, the truth is such that you can remove the footage, edit it out of a broadcast, or even change the website, but you can't take back what people saw or undo what was said. But one thing is certain, Donnie's farewell wasn't just an end, it was a beginning. And for the millions who felt his pain, his words, and his truth, that beginning might be just what they needed to see someone finally stand up and say, enough. Will he start his own ministry? Will he write that book that reveals the emotional weight behind fame and faith? Or will he retreat exhausted and heartbroken from the very pulpit he once held so sacred? Only time will tell. Donnie's journey is a wake-up call for anyone who has ever felt silenced, pressured, or burdened by someone else's expectations. You're not alone. We'd like to hear your thoughts. What do you think actually happened behind the scenes? Was Donnie forced out? Was he speaking out for others still trapped in silence? Please also like this video and leave a comment below. Remember to subscribe because this story is far from done, and we'll be right here covering what happens next. In the meantime, keep your eyes open because the truth always finds a way to make its way through in the world of televangelism. Share it with someone who needs to hear this message.